So most people are aware of J.R.R. Tolkien, and most people, I think, would know that he's a great author. He's a master storyteller. But what you might not be familiar with is one of his greatest works, the Book of the Fall of Gondolin, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Hello and welcome to Intermarifica, New Mexico, the channel where we look at questions of wonder from the perspectives of faith and reason, philosophy and theology, and especially one of the main reasons of this channel is to look at the wonders of the culture. Intermarifica, we find ourselves amidst these wonders, the way the church says, amidst the wonders of the culture, the modern world. And one of these wonders are books, literature. We have great literature, and that's what we'll be looking at today. Before I go on, I'm obviously in my traveling studio, aka my car. If you want to help me get a real studio and a real traveling studio, support us on locals. There's a link in the description. But I'm in my traveling studio and I'm in Texas, and it is sweltering hot, so I can't tell how much that's going to show up in the video, but just excuse that. I'm doing a series of highlighting master storytellers. So I've already done one. If you haven't looked at it, go check it out. I have got a bunch more lined up where there's an author that is so good that all of his works, or mostly all his works, are so good you can just trust that you pick up his book and it's going to be a masterwork. You're going to look at it and it's going to be really good. Most of their books are that way. And with these master storytellers, I want to highlight books you may not have read of theirs, you may not have heard. And today, one of the master storytellers, one of the greatest storytellers of all time, who almost single-handedly created the fantasy genre, is Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien. And most of us maybe have heard of his Lord of the Rings, maybe seen the movies. Many of us have read his Hobbit. And I encourage you, as an entry into his work, read either the Hobbit or Farmer Giles of Ham. Those are easy to get into. They're not difficult, they're not thick like some of his other stuff. Don't start with something like the Silmarillion, which is hard even if you already love his stuff. I love the Silmarillion now, but it took me a long time to really appreciate it for what it is. Read the Lord of the Rings after you've read the Hobbit, and don't feel discouraged if the first time you try to read the Lord of the Rings it's not as exciting to you as the movies, because sometimes it takes time to grow on you. I've read the Lord of the Rings. I can't count how many times I've read it. I love it, but I understand that there's parts that are a slog for some people. But I want to highlight a book today that I think is better than the Lord of the Rings. Maybe, hard to say better, but a really, really great book of his, The Fall of Gondolin. And he never got to complete, this is one of the three great tales of Middle-earth. He had three in mind, which is the Children of Hurin. I've already talked about that a little bit in other videos. Beren and Luthien, which I'll talk about in later videos. And then my favorite of the great tales is The Fall of Gondolin. He never got to publish these. The Children of Hurin was kind of the most complete of these three great tales. And it's my least favorite. Why do you have to complete that one the most? But it's still really good. But The Fall of Gondolin's my favorite. And Christopher Tolkien, when he's compiling after his father's death, he's compiling this. And The Fall of Gondolin he did right before he passed away, right before Christopher Tolkien passed away. He said, of all the unfinished works of Tolkien, this is the most grievous that he didn't finish. And I agree with him. I agree. It's one of my favorite books. Probably my second favorite book of all time, of fiction book. I don't want to spoil too much. I'm going to just give a light outline of what's going on in these three great tales and stuff. So the three great tales are about these three strongholds that are there, even though the bad guy Malco, or Morgoth, has taken over everywhere of Middle-earth. There's three strongholds left that haven't fallen under him. And each of them are going to fall in different ways, and they can only fall through treachery of someone within, and that's a big theme of kind of the elder days, is this treachery and betrayal being kind of like the worst sin, and it is. I mean, even in the Christian tradition, Judas is considered, his sin, one of the worst, because he betrayed Jesus, and when we betray our friends, that's really, really bad. So these three great tales are leading up to the thing that will, the tale of Eärendil that will overthrow, that'll lead to the overthrowing of Morgoth, and that's really cool, but he never finished that. But these three great tales are really good. So one of these places that isn't under the dominion of Morgoth is Gondolin, and it's this hidden city in the middle of this encircling walls that he can't find because there's magic around it that makes it so he can't find it, and the elves there are just growing in beauty and splendor and all kinds of really good things. So I love it. His description of the place is really good. And there's this human that comes around that's sent by the gods to, well, not by all the gods, because, right, Valinor has sundered itself from Middle-earth, but that is, he's being sent by the one god that's worried about what Morgoth, the devil, basically, is doing in Middle-earth. So he sends this mortal man to try to gather the elves and stuff to fight against Morgoth this one last time. And all that's really cool. Could get into all that. But of course, the elves don't heed the warning that they're given. And that story, it's a tragedy. These three stories, well, Beren and Luthien not so much, but these stories are all tragedies. They're stories of the great defeat. But they're so beautiful and so powerful, and I want to talk about some of the things that the Fall of Gondolin does really well that you can't get anywhere else. Like, these great storytellers open up a venue in our minds that we can't, that isn't available to us a different way. And Tolkien does that in the Fall of Gondolin, so I want to talk about some of those things that you cannot get anywhere else that you can get in the Fall of Gondolin. One of them is his way that he plays the tension, because this prophecy of what will happen if they don't go out and fight Morgoth is made, and they don't do it. So he's describing all this beautiful stuff and all this great stuff, but the reader, you know, and the people sort of know, but you know that all this is going to be destroyed horribly because they didn't listen. And there's that tension of doom. Doom is one of the themes of his work, and that's us when we sin. Because we know that God is going to make everything just. Everybody knows that. I don't care if you're an atheist. We've got our conscience telling us, hey, this needs to be made right. But it doesn't happen right away that it needs to be made right. So we feel, oh, nothing happened. I'm okay. But there's that tension in our hearts. And this story makes us enter into that tension in a real way. And you don't want this horrible thing to happen to the characters. And you know it's going to. And how it plays out is just one of the best stories I've ever read. Just the battles in it, really great battles and stuff. It's beautiful. The other good things is, so this is compiled by Christopher Tolkien from notes of his dad, J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. Tolkien never finished this. One of the things I like about this is for people who aren't scripture nerds or language nerds or any of these kind of academic types, it's sometimes hard to get in, textual criticism, comparing different things, searching out a story from its origins, that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff, and I've done a lot of work in that in my different schooling and my different work. But for normal people, sometimes it's hard to get into it. But this, the way Christopher Tolkien presents the different texts of Tolkien's work, of this story of developing and evolving, I think it's just a great introduction to how you have to trace a story in language, how you have to trace a story in history, those kind of things. It's beautiful, it's amazing, it's a great introduction to that. But then there's a great story in there, a super beautiful, wonderful story. So I think it's great that way. For a normal person who's not an academic to see how fun this is and how great it is, and just to be introduced with that without it being a really heavy-handed, tense, scholarly academic work, but give you the taste and flavor of that, and how stories evolve. I love that, right? Because one just an easy example for Christians is the book of Job. G.K. Chesterton talks about, this probably was not written by one person. It evolved over time, and it was built over time, just like a cathedral. And this shows how a story comes into being that way. And I'm using Job as an example because Job, I'm sorry, but is almost certainly not a historical. It's a poem. It's a fiction thing. I'm sorry if you're a literalist that's difficult for, but it makes Job all the better for me. So it's a great introduction to that. It's great. It's a great way of showing tragedy, but how tragedy is not final. And then this hope, it builds hope. The Fall of Gondolin especially shows how tragedy builds hope, and I love that. And Tolkien does this best at anything. I've seen criticisms like, everything's just too good in Tolkien's works. You need like Dune or George R. R. Martin or people like that to see how real the world is. And that's not true at all. You haven't read Tolkien if you think that. And this shows like this despairing, horrible events, but how they lead to hope. And so that's really good in The Fall of Gondolin. I really like how it showcases friendships. I think it showcases relationships really well, which sometimes Tolkien, especially in Lord of the Rings, didn't have. Sometimes that's a criticism you could say, is especially his man-woman relationships not as good, but this has really good relationships, and it shows especially, I think, when you respect a parent, but you know that they're wrong, and they're a good person and they're great, but you know what they're doing is wrong and not what they should be doing. So that's a really good part. So altogether, putting it all together, it's amazing. And then the best part of this book is at the end we get where Tolkien was like, no, I'm just going to finish this. And he writes about a third of the book in just this really amazing style. It's the best stuff I've ever written, probably. I can't imagine how beautiful this story, because he just has the original story in a text. You can get the whole story in just like a sketch of it. But then he was like, oh, I'm going to finish it. But he had to abandon it. And the part up to where he abandons it, it's just so beautiful. And it's amazing. It's so well written. I don't really know another person who can write like this. And like Christopher Tolkien said, it's when you get to the part where it cuts off, that's like the most grievous cut off ever, because you're so engrossed in the story and it's so beautiful. So I think that kind of though parallels the tragedy, the cut promise of the story of the Fall of Gondolin in the story. So it's kind of an interesting parallel. I should say, this book also, I like all this stuff I'm talking to you about that I like about. It's really short. You can get through it really quickly. You can just read the parts that are interesting to you. If you don't want to read Christopher Tolkien's notes, he makes it really easy just to get the story, just to get what you want. And it's a really short book, and it's really easy to get through. You can get through it definitely in a week. You could probably get through it. I got through it in a couple days. And so I love that. I love short stuff that is really powerful. So my bottom line for this is that it's a really, really good book. And I think that if you like Tolkien stuff, this should be your next Tolkien read. If you want more Tolkien, or if you just want a really good tragedy that gives hope, or if you want to get into reading historical stuff, if you want to get into doing textual criticism, if you want to get into tracing mythology, if you want to get into philology, that kind of stuff, or any academic language thing, okay, this could be good for that too. But I highly encourage you, pick up this book, read it. I hope you'll love it as much as I did. You have a good day. God bless you.